Hi, this is Cait from the Malden Public Library, and I'm presenting this week's 5 in 5. We're offering this weekly program to give you suggestions of what to watch, read, listen to, and most importantly, borrow from the library. My recommendations are horror themed this week, and hopefully will help you fill in the gap of spooky inspiration, since many of our typical events and seasonal haunts have been canceled this year. For the first title, I chose a short story collection partly because we were short on time before Halloween, and also because I run the library's Campfire Ghost Stories on Thursday nights. And my absolute favorite thing is spooky stories by a warm campfire. My first recommendation is Jeffrey Ford's Unnatural History of Hell. Celebrated short-form fantasist Ford seamlessly blends subtle psychological horror with a mix of literary history, folklore, and science fiction in this collection of 13 short stories, all focused on the struggles, sorrows, and terrors of daily life. Some stories are told in the modern era, others are set in unspecified periods. Each tale gently twists perceptions, diving down into ordinary and coming back out with a thoughtful nugget of the extraordinary. Each story has its own perfectly suited voice, and readers will be alarmed by how easily they relate to the well-meaning but inevitably destructive characters. My next suggestion is Grady Hendrix's The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. And honestly, I would recommend any of his books, but this is his latest work. When Patricia Campbell, a bored housewife in 1990s Charleston, South Carolina, sighs, "Don't you wish something exciting would happen around here?" she all but invites the chilling horrors that soon enmesh her and her friends in this clever, addictive vampire thriller from Hendrix. Hendrix draws shrewd parallels between the serial killers documented in the book club's picks and the antagonist's apparent vampire persona, loading his gruesome story with perfectly pitched allusions to classical horror novels and true crime accounts. This powerful, eclectic novel pays both homage to the literary vampire canon and stands singularly within it. This is a strong recommendation for anyone who loves true crime, but might also miss the Sookie Stackhouse series and True Blood. The next title is from Stephen Graham Jones, and he is another author whose literary works I would recommend in their entirety, especially because of his contributions to Indigenous horror, which is bending literary conventions and minds as it gains influence within the genre. The book is Night of the Mannequins. Jones tiptoes the border between supernatural and psychological horror in this weird and wild novella. Sawyer Grimes is one of 5 bored teenagers who decides to pose a discarded store mannequin as though it is a real patron in a movie theater in a suburb of Dallas, Texas. They all think it's a funny prank until Sawyer sees the mannequin walk out of the theater at the movie's end. When one of his friends is killed, along with her entire family, in a freak accident shortly thereafter, Sawyer becomes convinced that the mannequin is to blame. Balancing horror and humor, this novella puts a clever modern twist on a classic monster story. And speaking of monster stories, this next one is a classic with a bit of an update. I highly, highly recommend the 1818 text version of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's closer to her original text before the interference of her poet husband and preserves more of her original wording and political leanings. Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley is a founder of modern science fiction, and Frankenstein is an iconic monster of the horror genre. And this edition, by Penguin Books, is available at the library right now. So my final recommendation is actually a film, and it happens to be one of my favorite vampire films of all time. It is quiet and unsettling, but also warm, weird, and very human. The title is A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. The film is a 2014 horror Western film, written and directed by Anna Lily Amirpour. The film is described as being set in the Iranian ghost town Bad City and depicts the doings of a lonesome skateboarding vampire. It is also the first Iranian vampire Western ever made. A joyful mashup of genre, archetype, iconography. Its prolific influences span spaghetti westerns, graphic novels, horror films, and the Iranian New Wave. It is subtitled and in black and white, but don't let that scare you away. Its imagery and inventive storytelling will draw you in from the very first frame. And while I'm talking about film suggestions, if you're looking for more recommendations about what to watch this Halloween, you can check out our movie librarian's weekly suggestions on Facebook, called The Weekly Watch. Right now, she's making recommendations to add a bit of horror to your Halloween playlist. So head over there next and check her out. Okay, that's my 5 and 5. Thanks for watching. Hopefully these will keep you in the Halloween spirit.